Hello everyone, this is part 4 of What If Naruto Got Rid of the Kyuubi, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist. To see more, comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. When the Hokage recovered a couple of moments later, he groaned and sat up, looking around and found Naruto and Kurenai gone, but blood everywhere from the nosebleed. The ABNU had hit the wall and knocked himself out. The Hokage was questioning himself on what just happened and marked the jutsu as an S rank, forbidden. See, no jutsu is A rank. Naruto appeared in his home in the hot spring room that had a massage table. He set her on the massage table and pulled out a scroll and wrote on it and set it down beside her before walking out of the room, locking the door behind him from the inside. When Kurenai awoke, she groaned and slowly sat up and looked around. She thought, where am I? The last thing I remember was passing out from. She then looked around and found herself in an indoor hot spring, and she was sitting on a massage table. She looked around and found a scroll beside her with her name on it. Carefully she opened it and read. Kurenai, sorry to startle you by moving you while you were out, but my jutsu had blood all over you, the Hokage, and the ABNU, who all passed out. Being a refined woman like you, I figured you would not want to be made fun of by the two perverts, so I brought you back to my place for that lunch I promised, and I also have given you my private indoor hot spring to relax while I cook. Lunch will be ready in an hour and the door is locked from the inside. There is a washer and dryer in the towel closet to wash your cloths, plus bathrobes to wear while you wait for them to get clean. This is my way of saying thank you. Naruto. Kurenai blinked and thought, okay, this is a first, as she got up and checked the door, noticing that it was locked like he said. She thought about it and looked at herself in a mirror and said, what the hell? She then took her cloths off and put them in the washer and went to relax in the hot spring. Naruto had went to the kitchen and had created some kyuubi to begin cooking while he headed toward his room to also take a shower and get ready. 15 minutes later he came back downstairs from his room. Sensing that Kurenai was still in the hot spring, he went to the kitchen and saw that his clones were nearly done. Naruto nods and walks outside to get the last thing he needed. Some white lilies. When Kurenai came out of the hot spring room, she found herself at the end of a hallway. She turned and walked toward the other end, noticing the look of the house had a nice relaxing feel to it. She started checking doors and became more impressed as she walked along. She came across a library, a den with a fireplace, a bedroom that looked like it was possible a guest room, a bathroom, and then she came to the main guest room. Naruto came through a door to the right and said, "Did you enjoy yourself, Kurenai?" Kurenai said, "Yes, I did, thank you." Naruto nods and said, "Lunch will be ready in about another 15 minutes. Would you like me to show you around?" Kurenai said, "Yes, thank you. I must say I was impressed with the hot spring as well as the library, bathroom, and guest bedroom. The decor and design is beautiful and well thought of." Naruto smiled as he led her down another hallway and said, "Thank you. I take pride in what I built here." Kurenai blinked and said, "You built this?" Naruto said, "Yes. I did a little job and got some starting money. I then took a hobby of mine and got a lot of money from it real quick buying this land. I then took the trees here and cut some of them down and used them as material in this home to save money. This here would be the training wing of the house. It has an indoor gym, sparring room, weapon room with targets." Kurenai said, "I'm impressed. This must have taken you a long time to build." Naruto said, "About 6 months. I had to secretly order stuff from other countries to get what I wanted. I got some Suna clay tiles of the Wind Master series for the kitchen and bathrooms, some furniture from the capital of Fire Country, as well as the windows from Cloud Country." Quote. Kurenai nodded and asked, "How did you build this all in 6 months?" Another Naruto appeared at that moment and said, "Lunch is ready," before he went up in smoke, and Naruto said, "Kyuubi. Very handy." Kurenai stopped and said, "That's a forbidden A rank Junin jutsu. How does a genin know it, much less be able to use it?" as she looked at him. Naruto said, "I am still an academy student, and to answer your question is a secret I might tell you one day. Care to eat?" Kurenai nods and follows Naruto out of the hallway they were in out a door. She blinked and then froze as she stepped outside. There was a huge garden made with white lilies everywhere. Stone statues around the garden. A statue of the toad boss Gambunta shooting a water blast as the Shukaku with real water. An ice sculpture that looked like some kind of castle. Gambunta, Manda, and Katsuya all facing each other with their respected summoners on their head ready for battle. The Yondaime facing the Kyuubi on Gambunta head. Kurenai was amazed by the garden and Naruto smiled before clearing his throat and said, "Lunch is in the gazebo." Kurenai nods and asked, "Did you do all this yourself?" Naruto said, "Yes. Each of those statues is something I guess you could say I have seen in my life or dreamed it or something." The Sannin battle, Gambunta facing off against Shukaku, Kyuubi and the Yondaime, Princess Yuki's castle in Snow Country. It's even more lovely when the spring comes, as he closed his eyes and smiled. Kurenai looked at him and asked, "Who are you? I mean I know your name's Naruto and the Hokage knows you but who are you really?" Naruto chuckled and said, "Now that Kurenai is the million-dollar question. While you eat how about I tell you a little story?" Kurenai asked, "Aren't you going to eat?" Naruto said, "I will, I just wanted to ask if there was anything else you would like first." Kurenai looked around and said, "No, you got everything I could dream to have here to eat. All of my favorites and even my favorite drink, red wine. How did you get it anyways?" Naruto said, "I used a henge to make myself look older and then I order it to a store and pick it up there at a small commission." Kurenai asked, "What do you do exactly to make money?" Naruto said, "I'm an author. In fact you probably read some of my stuff. The Kitsune Hermit series." Kurenai stopped eating and looked at Naruto and said, "Nice joke. I know that it's Maelstrom that writes that stuff." Naruto snickered and said, "Maelstrom may have gave me the inspiration for the books by using his life as a guide and then being my business face but he did not write them." Kurenai thought a moment and said, "So you mean to tell me that you used Maelstrom's life as a basis for those books?" As she looked at him. Naruto said, "Yes, I just changed the names of people, locations, and a few jutsu names so no one knows what really was used. About 70% of those books is all true and the rest is just fiction setting I added to make the book more appealing to read." Kurenai asked, "Can you tell me about him? I mean who he really is?" Naruto sighed and said, "I can't. I am honored bound as a whirlpool ninja not to." Kurenai blinked and asked, "What do you mean whirlpool ninja?" Naruto said, "My mother was a whirlpool ninja and my father a Konoha ninja so that means that I was born technically a ninja of both villages." Kurenai said, "So you're just like Maelstrom." Naruto said, "In more ways than one. All I can tell you is that you would have to figure out the truth about him on your own. Anyways, why don't you tell me about yourself, Kurenai?" Kurenai said, "There's not much to tell about me. I'm 15 years old, I have been a chunin for a little over 2 years now. I really don't do much for hobbies and when I do have time free I usually hang out with my friend Anko. What about you?" Naruto said, "Well, I go by just Naruto now. Most of the village refers to me as the demon child so you can guess who I am. If you want to leave or are scared of me I won't harm you or try and stop you." Kurenai looked at Naruto and said, "I'm not scared of you Naruto." Naruto smiled behind his mask and said, "Thank you. For that I will let you on a little secret that I have told no one." Kurenai asked, "What's that?" Naruto reached up and pulled his mask down showing his face and said, "Cubus S." Kurenai blinked and asked, "What?" Naruto said, "When I was 7 years old you could say I discovered a way to K the Kyuubi. I then did it on my own and for the last 3 years I have kept the secret to myself." Kurenai asked, "Why would you keep that secret and why do you look like the Yondaime?" Naruto smiled as he pulled up his mask and said, "The reason I have kept the secret is because who else besides me would be affected by this? The people in this village would still think I am the demon, the Hokage would want me to explain in all details of how and why and then most likely forbid anyone from talking about it since my life is nothing but Konoha dirty little secret. In fact it's why he won't even tell me who my parents are though I done found out on my own. As for your other question, genetics." Kurenai blinked and got wide-eyed and said, "You're the Yondaime's son." Naruto said, "Allow me to formally introduce myself Lady Kurenai. I am Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, son of the Yondaime Hokage Minato Namikaze and the Kyuubi Raisenkage Kushina Uzumaki." Kurenai asked, "How did you find out?" Naruto said, my friend that did the test on my jutsu ran a blood test and compared it to those who were in the archives listed on file. Originally that came up with nothing. She then contacted someone who had connections to a friend in Iwa who also had blood samples of people from Konoha, and by getting those records she was able to get a blood match for me on who my parents were. Kurenai said, damn kid, I'm impressed. Naruto said, it's more complicated than that, but I won't bore you with the details or give information that might lead back to my friend. They have a habit of having accidents or suddenly becoming very stupid with their jobs when people find out that they're friends with me. Kurenai sighed and said, people are idiots. Naruto nods and said, well, you should feel honored. You're the first person in 2 years to see my face, and I know at least 36 girls who would to be in your position. Damn rabid fangirls, as he took a bite to eat. Kurenai said, so what were you doing outside of the village anyways? Naruto sighed and said, I was basically telling goodbye to my wife, as he took a sip of water and Kurenai spit out her drink. She then asked, what do you mean wife? You're not old enough to be married. Naruto said, when I was younger a girl came and saved me from death. We became friends secretly, and as close as we were getting we would most likely have gotten married in a few years. Anyways, she got herself into some trouble and I found out about it, so I went to help her. The long and short of the story is that with what happened we're not Chloe like we used to be, so I released her from her word to me so she could find real happiness with someone else. Her word was for me and her to get married when we were older, thus making it where I viewed her as my wife. Kurenai asked, so what happened to change things between you and her? Naruto said, a choice. I would rather not talk about it. Kurenai nods and asked, so, what are your plans for the future now since you're not getting married? As she thought how cute it sounded for someone so young to act older. Naruto said, live with my choice and make the best of it. If nothing else, I am a survivor. Kurenai finished eating and said, well Naruto, it was nice talking to you and I hope to speak to you again. How do I get out of here? Naruto got up and pulled his mask back up and said, thank you for coming Kurenai, as he kissed her hand. He then walked her toward two statues of a man and woman looking at each other with their hands reaching for each other and walked between them along a little path. They soon stepped out and of what appeared to be a forest, and Kurenai looked back and raised an eyebrow and asked, what was that? One moment we were in your yard and the next we're at the edge of a forest. Naruto said, my wife was good with genjutsu and she taught me some. I can do some but not many, however I can put them in seals to be used automatically. I have a total of 220 genjutsu that will make someone think they are in a forest when actually they enter the forest and turn themselves around and come out after what feels like a half an hour. Unless you come at this point right here that has those spirals right there, then you would be affected by the genjutsu. It's how I keep my home a secret, so please don't tell anyone. Kurenai looked at the symbols engraved in the trees and then at the others and said, you're very interesting Naruto, how do you know so much? Naruto said, when people hate you like they do me you have to learn to adapt. It's the only way I will ever see another day of life, sadly. Kurenai nods and said, well I will see you later Naruto, as she took off toward the village which she could see now. Naruto watched her leave and sighed before returning to his home. When Naruto got back home he thought, I got to do something to get more chakra or I won't be ready. Perhaps I can combine all my chakra seals. I would still need more though. That might work. As he went inside before making 3 Kijbunshin, as he stepped off his cloths and the clones began to draw some new seals on Naruto's body. The next day Naruto got up and got dressed and started toward the academy. Just as he was about to enter the academy, 4 ABNU appeared and one said, Naruto, the Hokage would like to see you. Naruto nods and one of them put his hand on Naruto's shoulder and they left in a swirl of leaves. The next thing Naruto knew he was bound to a wall and in front of him was Ibiki who said, who are you? Naruto said, I'm Naruto Uzumaki. Ibiki walked up and pulled off Naruto's mask and said, no you're not. Who are you and where is Naruto? Naruto said, I am Naruto. Ibiki motioned to the ABNU who nodded and one of them took a senbon needle before dipping it in some liquid and then espered Naruto in the arm, making him scream out in pain as the liquid burned his arm. Ibiki asked, who are you and where is Naruto? Naruto said, I am Naruto, get the old man, he can tell you. Ibiki said, it was the Hokage who told us that he suspected you were not Naruto. That is why I removed your mask and proved you're not Naruto. Naruto said, if you think because I don't have my whiskers that I'm not Naruto you're crazy, I found out about Kyuubi and ked it. Ibiki said, likely story but that's impossible, who are you? Naruto said, I'm Naruto, in a calm voice only to be punched in the face by Ibiki. Naruto looked up and spit out some blood and said, I am Naruto, run a blood test and see if I am not. All you have to do is have the old man run it against both my mothers and fathers and prove I am who I say I am. Ibiki laughs and said, Naruto does not know who his parents are. Who are you? Naruto said, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Ibiki blinked and said, kid, whoever you are you just digged yourself into a big hole. He then motioned to his men who all took out different weapons from whips to brass knuckles. Ibiki said, last chance, tell me who you are and where Naruto is. Naruto said, I'm telling you the truth. Ibiki sighed and said, loosen his tongue, as he walked out. One of the men started hitting Naruto in the body with his brass knuckles while another put more senbons into Naruto making him scream out in pain. After about 20 minutes Naruto chose to do something he had not done since he ked Kyuubi, he entered his mind. Naruto while in his mind did not feel any of the pain his body felt, it was a benefit of his mental training as well as putting up with a demon. This went on until he felt a tug at his end. Bringing himself out of his mind he looked through a swollen eye at Ibiki who had returned to the room and who was holding Naruto locket and Naruto said, give me that back, through gritted teeth. Ibiki said, tell me who you are and where Naruto is. Naruto said, run the damn blood test and you will know. Ibiki said, what's so special about this locket? Naruto said, it's all I have left of them. Ibiki asked, them who? Naruto did not say anything and Ibiki said, fine, if this means so much to you then let's see what you think to have it destroyed, as he walked over to a jar of acid. Naruto saw the jar and said, please, don't, just run the test and you will see I am telling the truth. Just don't destroy that. Ibiki looked at Naruto and said, sorry kid, you tell me now where Naruto is, who you are and how you know who his parents are and I will give it back. Naruto said, I know because I was told by Tsunade when she became Godime Hokage, I used a forbidden jutsu that let me come back to the past so I can Kei Orochimaru when he comes for the Uchiha. I really am Naruto, Uzumaki Namikaze, I was Jiraiya's apprentice who taught me about seals and how to Kei Kyuubi. That locket was all I was able to bring with me to the past and inside are a picture of my wife and son, please, run the blood test and give me back my locket. Ibiki said, nice story kid, one question, what was the name of the jutsu you used to get here if what you said is true? Naruto said, the Sands of Time, it's in Suna Forbidden Scroll. Ibiki said, well, I liked your fairy tale but since you lied to me, he then dropped the locket into the acid and Naruto tried to get free but couldn't as his eyes glossed over as he screamed as the locket melted away. Naruto then hung limp on the wall. All life in him was gone because he just gave up, no future, no hope, he just lost everything he had left as he watched the locket melt. Ibiki then motioned to the men in the room who all started beating him again as he left to talk to the Hokage. When Ibiki got to the Hokage office the third looked up and said, anything. Ibiki sighed and said, he told me some crazy-ass story about coming back in time with some jutsu called the Sands of Time. The third was up and in front of Ibiki before he could blink and said, tell me everything now, in a commanding voice. Ibiki caught his breath that has escaped from the surprise and said, well he said he was Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, he said he trained under Jiraiya and Tsunade told him who were his parents when she was Godime, he said he ked Kyuubi and that he was going to Kei Orochimaru when he came for the Uchiha. He said something about how his locket was all he was able to bring with him and inside was a picture of his wife and son. He kept asking me to run a blood test to prove who he was. The third's thoughts were going a mile a minute and asked, where is the locket? Ibiki said, I destroyed it in front of him to make him talk but he shut up after that. I got my men working on him now. The third said, stop your men and run the test and hurry, I hope that it is a fake story and not real. Ibiki asked, how can it be real, everyone knows you can't go back in time. The third said, unless you had access to Suna Forbidden Scroll. Ibiki said, he did mention Suna Forbidden Scroll. The third blasted Ibiki with ki and said, move your ass now and stop the interrogation. Ibiki nodded actually scarred by the way the Hokage acted. He then reappeared and had his men stop and had one of them take a blood sample. He then took it to the lab to be tested and soon got the results and took them to the Hokage, who had another result, and he looked at them and said, "It's true. 99 matched to his blood before the ceiling," as he looked down and said, "Bring him to me." Ibiki nods and leaves to get Naruto. Naruto was still limply held to the wall. Ibiki walked over to Naruto and released him and said, "I'm sorry, Naruto," as he took him to get treated. After Naruto wounds were healed, they walked to the Hokage office. Naruto just looked at the ground with grey clouded blue eyes. When they walked into the office, Naruto still had not said anything, and the third looked at Naruto and said, "Naruto, I want to Opolo." Naruto left in a swirl of leaves, shocking both men. The third sighed and said, "Have all ABNU try and find him." Ibiki nods and leaves. 2 weeks went by and no one could find Naruto. Over the time, the Hokage had been getting sadder and sadder. Kurenai and Anko were called to the Hokage and he looked at them and said, "Listen, I need to know if either of you might know where Naruto is." Anko asked, "Who is Naruto?" The third said, "In truth, I believe he is Maelstrom," making both women wide-eyed. Kurenai said, "But he can't be. Naruto may be advanced for an academy student, but there is no way he could take out 6 Chunin and Junins with one attack, as well as face off with Orochimaru and live." The third sighed and said, "Kurenai, Naruto is actually from the future. He used a forbidden jutsu to travel to the past, and I had Ibiki and his men interrogate him for 18 hours, and in doing so I believe they broke him mentally. He had a locket and inside of it were a picture of his wife and son," he said. Kurenai said, "Maelstrom said his wife and son were so if that locket was all he had of them." The third nods and said, "That is why I have had every ABNU in the village looking for him the past 2 weeks, because nobody can find him." Kurenai was quiet and the third said, "Please, if either of you might know where he is, tell me." Kurenai asked, "Have you tried his home?" The third said, "I have been to his apartment several times myself and he was not there." Kurenai said, "He does not live there, sir. He told me when he took me to his home he moved out of there 2 years ago. He built himself a home, sir, but it's surrounded by a powerful general. I got to go," as she started toward the door as something occurred to her. The third said, "Wait. Are you going to see him?" Kurenai said, "Yes. I think I know who his wife is." The third said, "Really? Then she might be able to help. Who is it?" Kurenai was quiet a moment and said, "Me," making both the third and Anko looked at her. Anko asked, "What makes you say that, Kurenai?" Kurenai said, "Well, if he really is Maelstrom as the Hokage said, then that means that when he told me why he was outside the village was not really as innocent as he said. He told me his wife had gotten into trouble and he went to help her, but now they were not close as they were because he made a choice. I did get into serious trouble on that mission and he saved me right when I needed it, like he knew what was going to happen. He also told me that his wife, as he called the woman he was to marry in a few years, was good at genjutsu. Maelstrom once told me that his wife and son were named Crimson and Storm Ore." The third, who was listening, said, "Kurenai and Arashi. You may be right, but the only way to know for sure is to ask him." Kurenai nods and said, "Well, he asked me not to show anyone where he lived, but I think I should anyways." The third nods and said, "All right, all 3 of us will go." Kurenai nods and leads the way, and soon they were walking beside some woods, and the third asked, "Where is this house at?" Kurenai, who was looking at the trees, said, "Found it," as she saw the symbols engraved in the trees. Anko said, "Found what?" Kurenai said, "There is a genjutsu covering the area here. If you don't walk between these 2 symbols here, then you would be put under the genjutsu to make you think it was nothing but woods. Follow me," as she walked between the symbols, disappearing as she stepped through, shocking the Hokage and Anko. Both looked at each other and nod before following Kurenai. When they walked through, they were amazed at the sight, and the third said, "Amazing," as he looked around. Anko asked, "How did this guy build this without anyone noticing?" The third said, "I don't know, but it certainly is impressive. Let's look in the house and see if he is here." Kurenai had already started toward the house, ignored the Hokage, and soon entered the house and said, "What the hell is that smell?" as she covered her nose. Anko followed her and said, "Death, something's slowly in here," as she covered her nose as well. The third, fearing the worst, went into the house. They found Naruto on his master bed sleeping, and it looked like he had not bathed, ate, or even got up to use the bathroom. He was still dressed in the cloths from Ibiki's interrogation. Anko said, "Damn, what the hell happened?" The third sighed and said, "I was afraid of this. They broke him mentally and he has shut himself down. I'm afraid there is nothing we can do for him now, as he looked down. Kurenai looked at Naruto and said, I have to know, as she began doing hand seals. She then touched his head and found herself in his mind. She then saw Naruto looking at a crystal and she watched as herself and him talked and made out. Naruto turned toward her and said, it's funny. I thought that I would at least see you find happiness in this life agent, now we're both my love. Kurenai looked sadly at Naruto and said, show me why you care for me. Naruto said, I could never deny you. Behold. As he waved his hand. The crystal shattered into millions of images and Kurenai watched from the first moment of his life to her own death as well as his starting over and then up to the moment he returned home after the interrogation. When it was over Naruto said, you're not her, are you? As he looked at Kurenai sadly. Kurenai said, I'm not your wife but. Naruto said, it's time, leave before you with me. As he turned and started to fade away as he walked from vision. Kurenai released the jutsu and Naruto took one more breath before he SD. Kurenai let tears fall as she ran out of the house. The third checked Naruto and looked down as he walked out and Anko did as well. The third saw Kurenai sitting on her knees crying and he walked over to her and asked, did you find out anything? Kurenai said, yes, I saw everything. Every moment of his life from birth till he came back in time, the changes H has made in the interrogation. Anko asked, so were you his wife? Kurenai said, yes, at least I would have been had he not changed history. The third sighed and said, it does not matter now. We don't have Sooner Scroll to go back in time and change things so there's nothing we can do but bury him and let the village know, as he began to walk away. Kurenai who was trying to get her emotions asked, what if we could go back? The third stopped and said, I don't know. It's dangerous to change things and if someone were able to go back how could things be changed? We just seen the end result of Naruto doing it. Kurenai nods and said, you're right. It would be a mission basically. Especially without screwing things too much. The third asked, what was Naruto plans? Kurenai thought a moment and said, Orochimaru in 3 years. That's the key, take him out and change the future forever. The third asked, would he have been able to be ready at that time? Kurenai thought and said, no, if he still had Kyuubi he could have no problem but without the fox's chakra his reserves even now were only around 10% of his normal reserves. The third asked, well I guess that is that then. I will give you a few days to sort those memories out Kurenai, then I want you to inform me about them. Kurenai nods and the Hokage walks off to deal with Naruto deaths. Anko looked at her friend and said, so what was he like to you or the other you? Kurenai was quiet and after a moment said, I don't know, but I would like to have talked to him about it, as she looked down. Anko nods and said, so, what's stopping you? Kurenai asked, what do you mean? As she looked at her friend. Anko said, I think you know. I guess I will catch you around, as she walked away. Kurenai thought a moment and said, I can't, as she got up and left. She took one last look at the house before heading home. That night Kurenai was in her bed sweating as her mind saw Naruto and her holding each other and confessing their love to one another. She then saw both hers and Naruto death and she bolted upright in bed shaking. She went to her bathroom and tried to take a shower but thoughts of hers and Naruto life together in the future kept hitting her. She finally gave up and went to take a walk. As she was walking she saw the Hokage sitting on a park bench and she walked over to him and said, can't sleep. The third shook his head and said, no. I promised his father that I would watch him and I failed. Kurenai said, you were like a grandfather to him and did the best you could. The third asked, what was his life like? I mean the future one. Kurenai said, it's not something I could describe myself. He was about to be Hokage when the leaf was destroyed. He never was allowed to use his family name even though he was the strongest person in the leaf since the council claimed Tsunade was biased. He also was never allowed to announce he was married or had a son. He blames himself for not being strong enough to stop Orochimaru when he had the chance as a genin. The third sat quietly a moment and asked, would you mind sharing his memories with me? Kurenai saw the sad look on the third face and said, all right, I think he would have wanted it to save the leaf. The third nods and said, let's go to my office to do it. Kurenai nods and follows him to his office. When they got there, the third asked, "Would you mind telling me those hand signs for that jutsu again? I never learned it because I thought it might be a trap." Kurenai nods and tells him, and he does them as she talked and then put his hand on her head. He found himself in a long hall with doors, and then he saw one that had a crystal on it and the name Naruto. He walked over and opened the door and stepped through. Time worked different in there, and he watched every moment of Naruto life and could not help but feel sorry for what he forced Naruto to go through. His sadness even drowned out the which to a pervert like him should not have happened. Eventually it came to the end, and he walked out of the room and cancelled the jutsu. As he cleared his thoughts, he looked at Kurenai and said, "Thank you, Kurenai. Please go home and get some rest." Kurenai nods and leaves to go home, but her thoughts kept going to Naruto. She may have not known him well, but now that she's seen his whole life, she understood him like herself, and it pained her. When she got home, she sat down to drink some coffee since she could not sleep, and came to a decision. She went to her room and got out a scroll. She then wrote on it, and then she went back to her living room and concentrated on a memory. She then slowly started to make hand signs, and 127 hand signs later she said, "Sands of time," as she thought about when she wanted to go back to X. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.